Welcome to this lesson on numerical expressions. Please make sure you have these notes in front of you so we can begin our lesson. The learning objective for today says, I can apply the order of operations to simplify numerical expressions. So let's go ahead and talk about the vocabulary on the left-hand side of our notes. Our first vocabulary word says numerical expressions. And numerical expressions contain a combination of numbers and operations. So an example of this would be 3 times 2 plus 4 divided by 4. This is an example of a numerical expression because it contains numbers and it contains operation signs. So the multiplication sign, addition sign, and division sign are operation signs. So this is an example of a numerical expression because it contains numbers and operations. Notice it does not have an equal sign. Our second vocabulary word is order of operations. And the order of operations tell you which operations to perform in order. So you want to make sure you simplify the numerical expression using a specific order and not at a random order. So let's move over to the right side of our notes so we can talk about our key concepts. So the overall goal is to simplify numerical expressions. And in order to do that, we have to use the order of operations. So the order of operation tells us to do it in a specific order. So let's use this acronym G, E, M, D, A, S to help us solve these problems using the order of operation. So whenever you simplify a numerical expression, start with the G. The G means grouping symbols. This includes parentheses and brackets. So whenever you see a grouping symbol, go ahead and simplify the items in the grouping symbol first. The E stands for exponents. So the second thing that we should work on after using the grouping symbols is to simplify any exponents in our numerical expression. The M and the D would be the next items to do, which mean multiplication and division. So when you come across a problem that has a multiplication and division symbol in there, you want to make sure you complete the one that comes first, left to right. If multiplication comes first, left to right, then do multiplication first. If division comes first, left to right, then do the division first. Finally, the A and the S stand for addition and subtraction. So you want to make sure you do addition and subtraction last after you do everything else above it. So be sure you do whichever comes first, left to right. If addition comes first, left to right, do addition first. If subtraction comes first, left to right, then do subtraction first. Use the acronym GEMMA to help you remember the order. So for example 1, they're asking us to evaluate the numerical expression. We know that this is a numerical expression because it has numbers and it has operation signs. So our job is to go ahead and evaluate it and simplify it using the order of operations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write GEMMA, G-E-M-A, and I'm going to use this to help me simplify this expression. So whenever you simplify numerical expressions, you're going to notice that your work is going to start to funnel down smaller and smaller. So if I solve this problem, the numerical expression, I'm going to ask myself, does this problem have any grouping symbols? And it does not, so I'm going to cross out the G. Does this problem have any exponents? It does not. The next thing I'm going to ask myself is, does it have any multiplication or division? And it does. So I'm going to check what comes first, left to right. So if I start from left to right, I know that the division, left to right here, I know that division comes first. So I'm going to divide first. I know that 36 divided by 3 is 12. So 36 divided by 3 becomes 12, and I'm going to multiply that by 4. So I've used my division. Now that I've used division, the only thing I have left is multiplication. So 12 times 4 becomes 48. So my answer becomes 48. If I didn't use the order of operations to solve this problem, I would not have gotten 48 as my answer. Example 2 is asking us to evaluate this numerical expression. So I'm going to write GEMMA again to help me solve this problem. And I know that my work will begin to funnel down as I start to evaluate it. So if I solve this problem, I'm going to ask myself, does it have any grouping symbols? And it does not. I'm going to cross out the G. Does this problem have any exponents? It does not, so I'm going to cross that out. The next thing I'm going to ask is, does it have any multiplication? And it does. Here's the multiplication right here. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 7, and that becomes 14. And let's drop down the rest of the problem. 4 plus 14. My next part of the problem is to just simplify what I have. So 4 plus 14 becomes 18. So my simplified answer is 18. If I didn't use the order of operations to solve this problem, then I would not have gotten 18 as my answer. For example 3, it's asking us to evaluate the numerical expression, so we're going to use Gemma once again. We know that our work will begin to funnel down once we start to simplify our answers. So let's ask ourselves, does this numerical expression have any grouping symbols? It does not. Does our expression have any exponents? It doesn't. Does it have any multiplication? And it does. So I'm going to start with using the multiplication first. So 5 times 2 becomes 10. Then I'm going to drop down the rest of my problem, which is 20 minus 10. And then I notice that it has a subtraction, so I'm just going to simplify the subtraction, and 20 minus 10 becomes 10, so my simplified answer becomes 10. If I didn't use the order of operations to solve this problem, then I would not have gotten 10 as my answer. So pause the video and complete the got it problems, and we'll discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Notice that this got it problem has two different parts. It has got it problem A and got it problem B. So in example 4, they're asking us to evaluate the numerical expression, and once again we know this is a numerical expression because it has numbers and it has operation signs. I'm going to use Gemma to help me solve this problem. I know that my numerical expression is going to start to funnel down. It's going to get smaller and smaller as I start to simplify each expression. So I'm going to ask myself, does this numerical expression have grouping symbols? It doesn't, so I'm going to cross out G. The next one, does it have any exponents? And yes, it does. So I'm going to simplify the exponents first. The exponent is 4 to the third power. I know that 4 to the third power, it is not 4 times 3. So don't say it's going to be 12. 4 to the third power is 4 times 4 times 4. When you multiply that out, you get 64. So 64 becomes the new number. Then I'm going to drop down the rest of the problem. Plus 2 times 8. So now the next thing I'm going to look at is the problem has multiplication in it. Multiplication comes next. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 8, and that gets me 16. And I'm going to drop down the rest of the problem, which is 64 plus 16. Last part, I only have addition left, so I'm going to add 16 plus 64, and I get 80. So if I didn't use the order of operations to simplify this problem, then I would not have gotten 80 as my answer. For example 5, they want us to evaluate this numerical expression, so let's go ahead and use Gemma to help us solve this problem. We know that the problem will funnel down as we start to simplify towards the answer. And I'm going to ask myself, do we have grouping symbols? And we don't, so I'm going to cross out the G. Do we have any exponents? And yes, we do. So I'm going to look at my problem, and our exponent is 5 to the second power. Please don't think that 5 to the second power is 10. It's not 5 times 2. What we have to do is do 5 times 5, which is repeated multiplication, which equals 25. So I'm going to write 25 in the place of 5 to the second power. And I'm going to drop down the rest of the problem. So let's look at the next part of the problem. They are giving us, let's ask ourselves if we have any multiplication, and we do have multiplication, which is 25 times 3. And 25 times 3 is equal to 75. So I'm going to write 75 there, and I'm going to drop down the rest of the problem. So I don't have any more division, and I don't have any addition. But I do have subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 90 minus 75, and my final answer becomes 15. So if I did not use the order of operation, then I would not have gotten 15 as my answer. So pause the video and complete these got it problems, and we'll discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Notice I have two got it problems on this slide. I've got it problem C and got it problem D. Alright, so for problem 6, it says, do you think both problems will have the same answer? When I look at both of the problems, they look like they have the same exact numbers. But let's go ahead and simplify each problem to see what we get when we simplify it. So let's go ahead and move on to the left-hand side, and let's solve the left-hand side problem first. And let's use Gemma to simplify this numerical expression. This problem does have grouping symbols, so I'm going to solve the grouping symbols first. And inside the grouping symbols, we have exponents. So I'm going to do the exponents first inside of the grouping symbol. So remember, 4 to the second power, it does not mean 8. It means 4 times 4, which is 16. And I'm going to add 3 to that and just drop down the rest of the problem. Make sure you drop down the parentheses as well. Times it by 2. So we still have a grouping symbol. Inside the grouping symbols, as I still have 16 plus 3, and 16 plus 3 becomes 19. Now that I've completed the grouping symbols, I can just drop down the rest of the problem, which has multiplication. So I'm going to do the multiplication now, and 19 times 2 becomes 38. So let's go ahead and solve the problem on the right-hand side to see if we get 38 as well. I'm going to still use Gemma to solve this problem. So this problem does have a grouping symbol, so I'm going to do the grouping symbols first. But inside of the grouping symbols, I have 3 plus 4, which is 7. So I'm going to go ahead and drop down everything else, and remember the exponent comes down and multiply it by 2. The next thing I have is I do have exponents. So now I'm going to use my exponent, which is 7 to the second power, which becomes 49. Then I'm going to drop down the rest of my problem, and the last thing that I need to do is multiply. So if I multiply 49 times 2, I get 98. So I noticed that my problem did funnel down. If I go back and I refer back to my both problems, I notice that they both have different answers. So the answer is no. We didn't get the same exact answer. So now that you've spent some time solving the other problems, let's take a look at this monster problem for example 7. It says evaluate the expression. Let's use Gemma once again to help us solve this problem. So let's start with, and we know that our problem is going to funnel down. It's going to get smaller and smaller. So let's look at our problem, and do we have grouping symbols? And yes, we do have a grouping symbol. And if you notice, we have a grouping symbol within a grouping symbol. So the grouping symbol inside of the grouping symbol is this one. So 3 plus 4. So let's do that 3 plus 4 first. And then we get 7 with that. Let's drop down the rest of the problem. So I'm going to drop down the divided by 14. Drop down the minus. Drop down that 5. Make sure you bring the grouping symbols with it. Times it by 2. Alright, we still have a grouping symbol. So inside of the grouping symbol, I'm going to look at what to do first. I see that there is a division sign inside of the grouping symbol first, so I'm going to make sure I work on the division problem first. 14 divided by 7 becomes 2. Let's drop down the rest of the problem. Okay, so inside of the grouping symbol, I still see addition and subtraction. So I'm going to do addition first because it comes first, left to right. And inside the grouping symbol, 13 plus 5 is 18. Drop down the minus 2. And make sure you bring down your parentheses as well. Inside the grouping symbol, I still have subtraction, so I'm going to do the subtraction now. And then I'm going to drop it down, so 18 minus 2 is 16. Drop down the time sign and the 2. And the last thing, now that the grouping symbol is done, I can go ahead and solve the last part of it, which is 2 times 16. So after multiplying it, 2 times 16 becomes 32. So the answer that I get is 32. So pause the video and complete the got it problem, and we'll discuss the answer in class tomorrow. So now that we've completed this lesson, go ahead and self-rate yourself and let us know how you feel. If there's any part of this video that you did not understand, please go back and re-watch it again. Also come to class with some questions so that we can discuss it in further detail.